Hey everybody, and welcome to this unannounced version of an episode of the Reach Films podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Fagan, and today we're talking about three things. We're talking mostly about camera news. We're talking about the rumors of the Canon EOS R6 Mark II. We're also talking about the announcement of the Sony ZV-1F. I've got the original ZV-1 right here. It's been a very useful camera in my arsenal, and this ZV-1F has an interesting slot in Sony's ecosystem, so we'll talk about that in a bit. And then the last thing on the agenda for today is we are talking about shooting a wedding in Anamorphic on the red Komodo. I just got back a few days ago from a destination wedding, and we shot it on the Canon R6, R7, and red Komodo, but the red Komodo was specifically an anamorphic. So I kind of want to talk about the process, answer any of your questions you may have. So if you're watching this after the fact, make sure to ask your questions or put your comments in the comment section below, and I'll get back to them after this video if you weren't here for the live stream. So first off, let's talk about the Canon EOS, the Canon R6 Mark II. So I'm going to pull up the specs right here because it's an interesting camera. So for those of you who don't know, right now I'm filming on the original R6, and sorry, the StreamYard changed how they let you pull up screens. So here's the M6 Mark II. I'm going to pull it up on a side screen right here. Okay, let's get to it. All right, so the EOS R6 Mark II is rumored to be very similar in specs to the R6. So it's going to have a 24 megapixel sensor, so it's a little bit higher of a sensor on the still side. It's going to have IBIS like the R6. It's going to have 12 frames per second in stills. It's going to have 4K 30 no crop, 4K 60 crop, which the 4K 60 crop is going to keep the same crop that is currently on the EOS R6, which is a 1.1 crop of full frame. So a very, very slight crop. The 4K 30 is not going to have any crop. Now, I got to be honest, the crop in the EOS R6 hasn't really been a big deal for me as far as what it does, because it's pretty much almost full frame, but it is nice to see that. It's going to have dual pixel CMOS AF. It's going to still keep the SD cards. So there's not really much of a change. So the one may ask, what's the whole point of this new R6? And I think there's going to be two things to it. Number one, the rumor is that the new R6 Mark II would have the sensor from the R3, the Canon R3. Now, especially in video, the dynamic range on the R3 is better than the R5, which is slightly better than the current R6. So I think the dynamic range for video and maybe photos is going to be a really big draw for some shooters who don't necessarily need the R5, but they want something that shoots compressed video, and they also want a little bit better dynamic range. So that would be really cool as well. The second reason I think they're coming out with an EOS R6 Mark II is going to be a little bit of a sad reason for current R6 owners, and it's the overheating. I have a feeling that, we saw this overheat update come out for the R5, and it very much fixed a lot of the overheating issues. However, we didn't see any of that love on the current R6. And I'm now starting to wonder if it's because it's not possible for them to fix a lot of the overheating on the R6. And that's a bummer. I definitely experienced it this past weekend. We shot a lot in 4K 60, and luckily we were turning on and off the camera a lot, but I still did actually have the camera physically overheat twice. Which was not good, but again, the R6 was part of using the R7 and the red Komodo, so it wasn't like it was our only camera, but we were using it a lot because the 4K 60 on the R6 for me was the biggest draw of this camera. The fact that of all the Canon cameras, it's the only relatively inexpensive full-frame camera that they offer that shoots 4K 60, downscaled from like 5.1, 5.2K. Where all of the other cameras, except for the R5C and I believe the C70, shoot 4K 60 in a line skip mode, so the quality just isn't as good. So it will be interesting to see if this rumor is true. Don't it is a rumor, but I mean, the same kind of info came out about the EOS R7 pretty early on, like 6 months before they announced the camera, maybe even more. So I'd say we're probably looking at this camera coming out around NAB time 23. So like I wouldn't say like, hey, it's time to sell your R6 now, but definitely keep an eye out. It may be time to start looking into the whatever the R6 Mark II may be soon. So just be aware of that. If you are looking to buy a full frame camera right now, probably wouldn't pick up the R6 unless you really needed Canon and you really needed their best like low light full frame camera, because that is what the R6 pretty much is. It's definitely the best in low light, pretty much out of any RF cameras, which I definitely got to put it to the test this weekend for the wedding that we shot. So it'll be interesting to see what the EOS R6 Mark II, getting confusing, is. So let's move on to the next camera, which let me pull up my brand page. Here we go. Banners. And it is the ZV-1F. And like I said earlier, I have the original ZV-1 right here. And the ZV-1F is an interesting addition. So I'm going to just pull up let me stop this. So the ZV-1F is a 1-inch camera, sensor camera, just like the ZV-1. However, it has a fixed lens, which here's DP Review's review. And so as you see right here, here is the new ZV-1F. It's got a fixed lens. It's a 20 millimeter lens, or a 20 millimeter equivalent lens. And I think the lens on here, it's very similar. It's very close. The lens on here, it's supposed to get close to like a 24 to 70, and the lens on the ZV-1F is slightly wider than what you get on the ZV-1, which is why they're aiming it towards a lot of vloggers, pretty much anybody, I would say, who isn't into cameras at the moment and you're looking to get into creating content for like YouTube or vlogging content, whatever it may be, and you want a really small, compact, actual pocket-sized camera because you can fit this in your pocket. The ZV-1F looks like it'll be really good for that. It's basically a stripped-down version of the ZV-1. Now, my whole thing with this camera is it's got most of the same features as the ZV-1. Again, missing some features, like doesn't have an internal ND filter like this does. Doesn't have a power zoom lens like this does. You're stuck with 20 millimeters, so not quite as versatile as the ZV-1. And if you've caught some of my other videos, I've used the ZV-1 as B and C cameras in other productions I've had, shooting in HLG, and having the zoom lens on this little pocket camera has come into a clutch, especially on a lot of documentary work, being able to just pop this out of my pocket, zoom in a little bit, get a nice shot of somebody that I didn't necessarily have time to set up a telephoto lens with one of my bigger cameras like the R6, R7. So it's not 10-bit video. The video quality is pretty much the same. It's got a similar autofocus system. It goes down to f2.0, where the ZV-1 does go down to 1.8, but that's not a huge difference. So I'm interested to see who picks up this lens. There's also another really big deal where the lens of the ZV-1 has image stabilization built in, whereas there is no image stabilization built in on the ZV-1F. You have to use digital stabilization, which definitely crops in a lot into the image. So like, I don't know how you're gonna really vlog with active stabilization on. It's really good, don't get me wrong. But for vlogging, you're gonna be cropped so far in, I don't really know how useful that is. And I like the fact that, you can use active stabilization on here, but you can also use lens stabilization and not nearly be as cropped in on the lens sensor as you are with active stabilization. So that's why the ZV-1F is kind of in a weird spot. I'm actually working on a video. That's why I have this in this configuration on the ZV-1, and show you the rest of the pictures here. But I'm working on a video on the ZV-1 and talking about, is it worth it in 2022? And it's funny that this camera just came out right now. I will tell you off the bat, one really welcome difference between the ZV-1F and the ZV-1 is the ZV-1F finally is rocking a USB-C port. So if you're going to try and live stream or charge the camera, it's more uniform with a lot of other cameras you probably already own, or a lot of devices that people who are looking for the ZV-1F may already own. Because the ZV-1 actually uses a micro USB, so I don't have anything that uses micro USB anymore. So I pretty much have to keep an extra cord lying around for the ZV-1, just because if you haven't seen my video, I'll link it in the description later, but I've pretty much moved everything I own to USB-C. That way I only have to carry one type of cord, one type of charger. Excuse me. So I'm glad they went to USB-C. As far as updating the ZV-1, there definitely needs to be some updates coming to this camera. The biggest thing I could say is the ZV-1 really needs to get a 10-bit version of what is in this camera. I think if they came out with an update to the ZV-1 and literally just replaced the USB-C with, the micro USB that's in this camera with USB-C and gave us 10-bit 4K 30 footage and maybe slightly wider on the wide end, I think this camera would sell like crazy, because I originally bought the ZV-1 when the red Komodo was my main camera and I was using all Blackmagics for live streaming. I didn't have any DSLRs or any mirrorless cameras. I've had DSLRs before. And the ZV-1 was kind of my gateway drug into realizing I needed to have mirrorless cameras in my life. But it was missing things like 10-bit. So when you're grading the footage on here from either S-Log or HLG, does crunch it a little bit. I've done it. I've used, actually, Cinematch has a profile for this. So I shoot in HLG so I could shoot less than ISO 1000 if I want to get, not as grainy images. And it does match okay, but if it was 10-bit, it would be better. So I'm interested to see what the update to the ZV-1 would be. I hope that the rumored update was not the ZV-1F, but we'll see. The other thing, too, is you may notice I have this little plate down here. And I think the ZV-1F suffers from the same problem where the 1/4-inch thread on the bottom, it's blocked if you're using a tripod. So you need one of these redistribution plates so you can, leave this thing on a little, selfie stick thing like this, or put it on a tripod and then be able to open the battery door and change your batteries. Luckily, companies like Urig, I think this is owned by Ulanzi, make these cool little distribution plates. But it would be cool to not have to use them at all, because I literally just, have this on the bottom so I could put it on tripods. So that's the ZV-1F in a nutshell. Interesting camera. Don't know if I'd pick it up. I'd rather see a ZV-1 successor. So there's that. Going over to the comments. What is going on, my man? Thank you for watching us live. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. And we're going to move to the last part of today's podcast before I answer your questions. And that is shooting a wedding with the red Komodo in anamorphic mode. So as some of you may have seen, if you haven't, I'll put a link in the description on the video I did with Suray's 35mm anamorphic for RF cameras. I really like that lens, especially for, the quality to price ratio you get. That lens is like $600 or something. Gives you just amazing images out of crop censored cameras. I'm talking about the crop sensor original Suray 35mm they made. And, when I had this wedding coming up, we knew we were going to shoot it on the R6 and the R7. But we also knew it was one of my best friends from high school, and I wanted to do something special for him. So I brought my Komodo and shot anamorphic. So most of, pretty much everything shot on the R6, R7 was all normal spherical lenses. Shot a lot on, Sigma art glass and Canon's 35mm prime, which we're using right now for this video. But the 35mm anamorphic was special. So before I even talk more about it, let me show you a little clip I made just for today's video so you can get an idea of what it looks like. And here we go.
Close my eyes, you're looking back at me. As real as autumn air, I take and breathe. Try as you might, but you can't
So that's the really short clip. I didn't want to, give away too much. I've actually shown the bride and groom that clip just to kind of show them what the anamorphic footage looks like. And it was very interesting. So in this wedding, I shot with the Komodo and the Siré on the RS2 with the follow focus motor, because as the RS2 and RS3, it lets you follow focus from that pistol grip in front. And it's just the easiest gimbal I've ever used to be able to manually pull your own focus while operating on a gimbal as a solo operator. So it was very easy to do, a lot easier than I would expect. And I can understand why the LiDAR system that came out on the RS3 is so many people are hyped about it, because at that point you wouldn't necessarily have to pull your own focus, although I don't mind doing it, especially in anamorphic. The other thing too is the fact that the Komodo lets you natively view and record your anamorphic footage in camera. So it will de-squeeze everything in camera. You'll view it the way it's supposed to be viewed. And so filming an anamorphic on the Komodo is a really easy experience, which is part of the reason I wanted to do it for them and kind of see how the footage came out. We got some really, really special shots. To be honest, not a lot of flaring. And this lens is prone to flaring. And I got maybe like 4 or 5 shots in the entire wedding that had some flaring going on in it. So it was more about kind of the way that it renders bokeh in the background. I wanted some like really artistic shots to kind of show off, the venue we were at. We were in the Keys and we were in a really beautiful venue. So it was really cool to be able to film an anamorphic, show all of that. And the RS2 definitely helped make the entire anamorphic filming situation easier, because I had the camera hooked up to the RS2 besides with the follow focus motor. I also had a start-stop cable that hooks up directly from the Komodo to the Ronin. So I was able to actually start and stop directly from the Ronin as well. And then for monitoring, I actually used my phone for all of the red monitoring of the Komodo, and it really helped. Now, originally, I had my old iPhone 7 Plus that I've been using to monitor, and in this wedding, I noticed I was starting to get some lag, so I switched to a more modern iPhone, and although this looks like an older iPhone, it's the brand new iPhone SE 3rd Gen, so it is a brand new phone, and it worked amazing. No lag whatsoever, or I guess technically if you looked at it, there's probably slight latency, but not enough latency to prevent me from pulling focus by any means. And so it was nice to have not a cordless setup, but any cord that I had that was hooked up to the Komodo hooked up directly into the gimbal. So I didn't have a lot of cables kind of hanging everywhere. And so I really like how compact I was able to get that Komodo setup and run not the entire day, but I'd say at least 50% of the day I ran on the Komodo, while I had a second shooter with me using this R6, and he was on a gimbal as well. The R6 surprised me because, number one, we overheated a lot, but that was the bad part. The good part was I was able to run this camera with the 35mm 1.8 on the original DJI RSC. The original RSC. These names get so confusing. It's probably why they got rid of the RSC name. But we used the original RSC with the R6 and the 35mm. We didn't even add the follow focusing system to it. We just ran with autofocus. And I gave it to a buddy of mine who comes from shooting on the GH5. So he's used to having to pull manual focus. And his footage was great. And it's kind of a testament to Canon's autofocus system, how well it works. It would have been nice if the FX30 came in. I would have loved to push that on this as well, but I didn't get the chance. So that was the kind of the short of filming this wedding in anamorphic. I really enjoyed it, and I'll do like a proper breakdown video soon, but I just wanted to kind of put this out there. And yeah, that's today's podcast. Nice short. That's why I did it kind of early. I do have a shoot later on today, so I couldn't do this live stream as later as I wanted to do it. So now let me get to your guys' questions. So I'm sorry if I butcher your name, Zeshko. Your suggestion for the lens on the R7 for weddings would be the Canon 24mm 1.8. And I would probably, I haven't had it in hand. We spoke about this in the last live stream I did, where the 24mm, it seems, isn't as sharp as the 35mm. But if we're going to talk about just field of view, we were able to roll with this R6 and the 35 millimeter on the DJI RSC all day. Of course, we had other supplemental cameras, but the R6 with the 35 mil was basically one of our main cameras. So yeah, I could kind of see using the R6 or the R7 with a gimbal and the 24 mil, and you'll get about the same field of view. So yeah, I think it would be a really great wedding setup for sure. Just remember, it isn't quite as sharp, so you may, especially shooting wide open, I should say, not quite as sharp. So you may want to stop down a little bit when you're shooting with it. However, it being a 1.8 lens will definitely help you at night during the reception, being able to get some more low light footage. So yeah, I probably would use the 24 for weddings. I think at this point, the only reason I don't pick it up is because I have the R6. But once I get the FX30 in, play around with it a little bit, we'll kind of see where things go if I keep the R6 or the R7. I think if I just only had the R7, I think you're kind of on point there. I would go with the 24 mil just because it makes the most sense. So yeah, I hope that helped you there. And slow live stream today that we're doing, for those of you who are listening to the audio version of this podcast, I did it randomly in the middle of the day, and those are never the best times to do, but we're doing a wakeboard shoot later today. So it's kind of, I had to pick and choose, either do this video today. Oh, I guess I should also kind of let you all know there's not going to be a video this week. This is pretty much going to be this week's video, just because I just got back from this wedding. I had to catch up on a lot of work that I missed last week while traveling. So I hope you enjoyed what we went over today. We went over kind of a lot in a short period of time. I know we're here sitting at 23 minutes. No, thank you for joining, my friend. Really appreciate it. Short podcast today as I got to start packing up for this shoot. But I do want to thank you all for joining today. I will be trying to, my goal is to do one of these podcasts once a week. Originally, my goal was to do them on Fridays, and I think I'll probably stick to doing them on Fridays around 4:30, 5 o'clock. But again, filming this week, I actually have a shoot today. I have, I don't know how much I can talk about it, but I'm shooting for like a true crime series tomorrow. And then next week is a little bit of a busy week as well, shooting some doc type content. But we are getting back into the schedule. So if you want to stay tuned to these live streams and you're not subscribed to the channel or subscribed to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, make sure you do keep up with the latest content on the channel. And you can also see some of the other awesome content. As far as content coming out on the channel, I do have a video coming out on the ZV-1 talking about, is it worth it in 2022? And it's kind of a mixed bag. So it's not going to be a glaring yes or a glaring no. It's going to kind of be one of those, it depends. So there's a little spoiler for you. I also have a video coming out on the FX30. I'll be testing it against the Canon R7. Actually testing it against the Red Komodo as well, just to kind of see where it stands, since both the Komodo and the R7 are technically crop censored cameras. So it'll be fun. So thank you everybody again for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And until next time, my name's Jeff Fagan. I will see you guys in the next video.